So yeah, Shadow of a Doubt, Hitchcock's movie, entry for 1943, uh,
Yeah.
and a movie that he has on a number of occasions called his favorite of all of the ones he's ever made.
Right. Which I don't know if I'd ever heard that before, and I'm a little surprised that he
I
picked
was very
this one.
surprised to hear that.
Yeah, it's yeah. What are your all's feelings on Shadow of a Doubt?
Pretty good. Not my favorite Hitchcock movie. I think there's a lot to like about it. There's a lot of things that are there's like some kind of innovative stuff about it, but I think it does feel like pretty like classical Hitchcock like tension, like the bubbling like insidiousness of like people that's like just under the surface. And it also has like definitely some kind of Hitchcock perviness to it also. It's got a bunch of train stuff. Hitchcock loves trains.
Mhm.
You know, lots of talk of murder and like kind of like pitch black humor. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm surprised that he was like, "This is my favorite one," not like Psycho or North by Northwest or like I don't know. I feel like those movies I think are much better. But
Yeah, it's got a weird amount of jolliness in it for a Hitchcock movie. Like until it really like sinks in that we're dealing with a murderer, an undercover murderer. There's just a lot of like nice times and joviality for like 40 minutes of this movie.
yeah, I don't know. Like, I think some parts of this movie work really well, and I think other parts really kind of didn't work for me very much. But I might have been like trying to get ahead of the movie a little too much because it's a pretty straightforward setup. I think I was kind of expecting sort of like a double twist or like more of like a twist ending situation or like there to be more like of a reveal to it. And I think it's like yeah the movie as it is presented like pretty much from the get go is what you get. I think I was sort of like maybe after watching The Lodger too because I feel like
Mm.
the first act of both this and The Lodger, I think are very similar.
Mhm.
And I think I was sort of almost expecting. I was like, is this going to be like a The Lodger situation? And then it very much isn't. And I think I was sort of maybe expecting him to try to do more of a take on that movie or like a twist on that movie's premise. And I don't really think that's what like this movie's about. This is a lot less like of a twist movie than I think I went into it expecting it to be.
Hmm.
So that maybe that's on me.
No, I was the same exact way because immediately after finishing the movie, because this was my first time watching it, and I had seen some like earlier Hitchcock, but most of the stuff I've seen is, later in his career.
Mhm.
But I mean, some of my favorite Hitchcock movies, obviously Psycho, which, you have this crazy twist. I love Dial M for Murder. It's so fast paced and I feels like, every second is a twist. North by Northwest, I mean, you just have this like, it's has that thriller vibe. You have the iconic scene of like the plane trying to go after Cary Grant's character. So I was expecting just those big moments. And
Mhm.
whenever I watched it, because, from the very beginning, that this guy is up to no good, that something is off. And we know that young Charlie essentially knows his secret or is going to, get very close to it very soon. So I was expecting, yeah, just more twists and thrills. And this one, like you said, is very straightforward. Um, so immediately after, I was kind of like, oh, that's disappointing. But I went back and did some reading about it. And I think the reading that I did made me appreciate the film more. And I know, Chris, you mentioned how there's like a level of joviality to this film.
Mhm.
Um, and based on what I was kind of gathering from different sources I read and just like my own experience from the film, I wonder if that was intentional, considering that, one of the major themes of this film is the ordinary. It's something that's talked about a
Hmm.
lot. So I kind of wonder if it has that vibe because it's trying to feel, inviting, like, the girl next door, this is the film next door or whatever. And the point is, like, we're uncovering something sinister. So I think that joviality really plays into it, especially how the film kind of traces like young Charlie's loss of innocence.
Hmm.
And I think as you watch the film, you can see that occurring. but yeah, the joviality I think is probably intentional. It just makes it feel more, like suburban America. This is where happy things happen and happy people live. But actually, there's a murderer in town.
The way that you talk about it kind of makes me think of Blue Velvet in a way, like
Mm.
the premise of the white picket fence being a cover for the kind of horrific goings on beneath the surface.
Well, I actually think Lynch was, which since this is fairly recent, rest in peace, David Lynch. But I think Blue Velvet actually was kind of like directly inspired by Shadow of the Doubt. So
Oh,
yeah,
Hmm.
I found that, and I actually saw, I think it was in Vanity Fair, they had an article that basically just summed up, a lot of David Lynch's work, but I thought summed up this film very well. And I wrote down the quote. It says, uh, Lynch saw the nightmare below the American dream. And I think that's exactly what this film was going for,
mm,
especially like I'm a huge history nerd, so I love to, talk about the historical context. But obviously, it's wartime, and this isn't when suburbia is like really blowing up, but it's at the early stages. And of course, at this time, well, and a little bit later, like 50s, 60s, white flight and everything. But I think there's the idea that this smaller town or like this suburban area is safe and calm and peaceful and ordinary. But, there's actually this very sinister underbelly right there, which, like, David Lynch, that's a lot of his work, honestly.
Yeah, I did think of. I was reminded of Blue Velvet watching this. I think yeah, that like yeah, the like sort of very kind of classical like Americana imagery that is sort of papering over this like yeah sinister darkness.
we always forget to kind of do like a quick plot summary, and I realized that we
Oh.
did again. But
Let's do
but
that now.
this movie is about uh Uncle Charlie, who is actually a serial killer, who is fleeing from the law on the East Coast, goes to the West Coast to hang out with his relatives and particularly his niece, who is uh, named after him, young Charlie, and some kind of detectives have followed him from the East Coast and are investigating him while he's trying to kind of blend in and appear normal in front of his relatives and in front of the town. But he keeps doing suspicious things, like having a ring with the engraved name of someone else on it, or having a lot of money that he's that he's trying to deposit into the bank. And eventually, he starts trying to kill his niece when she finds out what's going on.
I think there's a lot of this movie is characters behaving in insanely like suspicious ways. Not just Uncle Charlie. It's like I feel like every character in this is like very bad at hiding anything. Like Uncle Charlie is like pretty much is like very suspicious from kind of the get go. Not necessarily as soon as he arrives at like at the family's house, but then like the detectives are also super suspicious and bad at their jobs, and like they're trying to kind of like have this cover of like government kind of like census people who want to come into the house and take pictures and interview everyone, and they're doing it in the most suspicious way possible, and they're so bad at hiding it. And I think that was kind of one of the things. I think that the two detective characters I think are like maybe it's Hitchcock trying to like make them buffoonish, but I feel like those characters like did not work for me. I did not find the sort of like romantic subplot with the one detective. I didn't think that worked at all. Like I thought it felt like it sort of arose out of seemingly nowhere and just felt very forced and kind of tacked on. But Joseph Cotton, I think, is very good at
Very.
playing sort of like a very charming creep, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, but like he plays it in a very good way. Where, like he is genuinely very charming, and yet then when he like does something that's suspicious, you're like, oh no! But I liked him though.
Also, by the way, like our third Joseph Cotton year in a row. He's
Yeah, he's crushing he's just in all the big movies in the 40s, I guess.
And isn't he in the 1944 Gaslight
Oh, is he?
the very next year? Yeah, I think it's
I guess we'll find out.
there were two versions of Gaslight.
I think we skipped the earlier one, and then
yeah, the first
there's
one was the British one from 1940 that we skipped.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, the 1944 one, I think he was in that one too.
See, see, this is good that this is good that you're saying that because people are always like talking to us about classic movies, and it's just like I haven't got there yet. Like I don't know, I haven't seen Gaslight.
we're very well versed in everything up until the year that we're doing that
Yeah.
week, and then it's like,
Okay, wow. Our Joseph Cotton quadruple feature continues.
yeah, 100% cut.
Something else I'll add about this film, though, is so the first time I watched it, obviously, I'm just, watching it as a vibe, whatever. The second time, I tried to pay more attention, and I noticed in the scene where he's arriving into town on the train, I love that because you see this, like, plume of black smoke filling the air from the train. And
Hmm.
behind that, it's the most beautiful clear sky. So I feel like that right there is telling you, like, hey,
Wow.
evil's coming to town, there's something sinister about to happen. And then also whenever he gets off the train and he's kind of like faking, being injured or whatever, I thought of Willy Wonka whenever he comes out to meet the
Mhm.
kids and then he's like, faking like he's limping and stuff and then does a whole somersault. And
Hmm.
obviously, just thinking of Willy Wonka, you know how like sinister that ends up being. So it made me think of the same thing. So yeah, on my second watch, I was like, oh, okay. So this film is telling us like evil's coming to town, something strange is about to go down.
I love that image with the black smoke. That's really it's really cool. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful image when you take a look at it because there's just like it's literally just polluting the air as if his arrival is tainting this town.
Hmm.
So I think I did think about while watching this movie was I thought there might be a twist where he isn't actually their Uncle Charlie and he's someone who is sort of like taken his place because there's a whole thing where like they haven't seen him in a long time and then there are no photographs of him because he refuses to be photographed. And like I thought that like there was going to be a twist of like no, this is like a guy who looks similarly to their uncle
I'm
who has
wearing
like
the
murdered
face of your
him.
uncle.
Yeah, or just like he's like a guy that knew his uncle that like killed him and took his identity or something. I mean that doesn't really make sense because once he shows up, it's like well they all know who their uncle like they've met him before like that wouldn't work. I thought that that might be where the movie was going, and it doesn't at all. But and then also there's like a lot of just weird tension between the two Charlies that feels like it's like the Hitchcock perviness rearing its head a little bit. Like
A
I
little
don't
bit
really know what to
incestuous.
make of it, but it's like there's some weird shit going on there. Is all I feel like that's all I really have to say about it.
Something I'll add to that is also on my second watch, I noticed whenever we meet Uncle Charlie and young Charlie, like the scene is almost parallel to each other, where we find Uncle Charlie laying in bed in his like dark suit, and then we see the detectives outside. And then whenever we meet young
Mm.
Charlie, she's also in the bed, and it's almost like the same exact angle. So I don't know, what to make of those parallels because I'm sure there's more throughout the film that I didn't catch. But yeah, I was definitely thinking a lot about their potentially incestuous weird relationship. Also, yeah, I didn't know what to make of it, but I felt it for sure.
I mean, it does feel like sort of a like a reflection of this sort of corruption of uh like familiarity
Mm.
and normal interactions. Like if there is something sexual, it is a it's like it's a similar situation of like a relationship that would be pure, like a town that would be pure, that is being tainted by the presence of this evil person.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the movie is like trying to imply more to that maybe, and that was a thing that I'm sure was like not Breen and the Hayes Code were not happy about. I don't know if this movie ever got pushback on anything, but also the shots of them uh, like in their respective beds in different cities, I think are mirrored also. Like they're both kind of facing. Like if you were put them side by side, I think they're like facing each other. Which I hadn't picked up on that, but that's it is like makes sense as kind of they're drawing a lot of parallels between those two characters before they ever actually like share the frame.
A couple other things that I want to mention. There was like a really I really like shots like this where there was like when young Charlie is starting to sort of doubt the goodness of her uncle that she has all this respect for and everything. It shows there's a particular shot where she kind of starts feeling this tension and doubt, and it doesn't show her face, it shows her hands. It shows her hands just kind of
Mm.
being like expressing her nervousness, and in and I found it very effective. Like a, a more subtle way of expressing that thing. Uh, and then the other thing that I wanted to mention is there's this kind of like side thing going on in this whole movie of her dad and his best friend being big like true crime junkies, basically.
Yeah, they're obsessed with murder and like hypothetically discussing how they would murder each other in like in a very like cheery conversational way. That is a very funny gag. I feel like I
Yeah.
was there was anything where I was expecting that to maybe like kind of play into the plot a little bit more, which I guess it kind of does, but that is like a funny like recurring thing. Oh, but then I also wanted to bring up the younger sister in the family who is constantly reading books.
Oh,
The little nerd girl.
The little nerd girl who's like reads like 8 books a day. Just really funny scenes. Like there's a bit where she's I forget what the sister says, but then someone's like, "Don't be literary. Like get out of here. Stop being a nerd." This movie does have, I think, a common Hitchcock thing. It's like the supporting cast is really good. Like the characters feel really distinctive. Like all the family members, all the sort of like people in the town, even just like if they have one scene, there's like the one of young Charlie's, I guess like former school classmates works at like the bar, and it's just like that's just like a
yeah.
bartender character that like doesn't really play into anything. It's just kind of there, but it's like feels like such a distinctive character, even though she's in one scene.
I agree. I picked up on the same thing. And kind of going back to what Chris said about you mentioned something about like young Charlie's hands whenever she like officially found out. Can you repeat that part? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Ah, man, I'm trying to remember the exact scene, but like it was when she was kind of getting information, I believe, that was like seeming to incriminate her uncle that she loves so much, and so she was kind of like wringing her hands and expressing her anxiety through her hands.
Yeah, so the scene where they're, like, on the way to the bar, first, I thought it was just a funny scene when she, like, starts to cross the street and the crossing guard yells at her and is like, "Hey, you can't do that in this town." I just thought it was, like, a cute little highlight of, wow, crosswalking or jaywalking, whatever, is one of, like, the worst things you can do in the town at this moment, and she seemed, like, very surprised by the crossing guard's reaction, so I thought that was funny. But when they're actually like walking into the bar, or maybe it's when they're already inside, I noticed that, yeah, it's when they're inside and Charlotte's like sitting down. She's kind of like, she has both of her hands on her elbows, kind of like, touching the other arm's elbow, looking very nervous. And then there's another part like shortly after that where I think he touches her and she says, "Don't touch me." So the physicality I thought was
Hmm.
very interesting, but also like with that bartender, she briefly tells her life story about how I think she says she's been at like she's worked at every restaurant in town or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that was supposed to be meaningful, but I did think it was interesting because it just seemed like she was very beaten down by
Hmm.
this town and maybe like another example of something that is average but average in a negative way.
Or maybe like also emphasizing the kind of not like not holistic window that this kind of typical American family, quote unquote, has even on the town that they're in, right? They
Yeah.
have this they have this like American dream vision of their own reality, that it's not just problematized by their serial killer cousin or uncle. It's problematized by like maybe these ways that like there is some more complexity in this town that they
Mm.
just are
Hmm.
not party to.
Yeah. Very well said.
Yeah. I think that I guess I didn't really realize about this movie until I watched. There's a really good video essay on YouTube about how this movie uses location shooting. Because I guess during World War II, there were a lot of restrictions on how much money Hollywood studios could spend, and so they end up reusing a lot of sets and backlot things. And this movie is basically all sort of like town exteriors and interiors that typically I guess they would have had to build. But since there were all these limits on like how much film stock they could use and how much money they had to spend on sets, ended up just shooting it at the town Santa Rosa, where it's also set. And that it does kind of give the movie a bit more of kind of a grounded, like realism to it, I guess, than because it's not shot in a back lot or on sets as much. It does feel a little bit more. The town has a bit more kind of specificity and character to it. Also, I think that it's just a real town. And yeah, because it's like I feel like there was a lot of location shooting in silent movies. Like a lot of times they would just go outside and film someone like driving a car around. Whereas I think once they made the switch to sound, it was like because the microphones were so terrible, they were forced to shoot everything on a back lot. And I guess this was kind of or an early example-ish of like a Hollywood sound movie that's shot almost entirely on location, which is pretty cool.
It's kind of weird that like location shooting was cheaper in this case. I guess because they didn't need
Mm-hmm.
to construct the thing, but usually that's the opposite is the case.
Yeah, I think it's like a weird curve because like I think anything that I ever made is like super super low budget, and it's like it's usually cheaper. Like it's sometimes very expensive, like rent out locations or something like that. But it is usually cheaper just to find a place to go to rather than build something. But I think once you have like a little bit more money to spend, then it ends up being cheaper to build it. So it is like, yeah, I think it's one of those weird sort of curves of once you have a little bit more money, it's somehow cheaper.
When I went to when I went to LA for the first time, I did the Paramount Studios tour, and I went to the back lot, and they were, they have these backlot sets that they reuse in many cases, but they'll do like kind of alterations to fit the movie itself. And so while we were going through all the backlots, I saw like a bunch of people working on kind of remaking one of the sets in order to just look the certain way that it needed to be for whatever they were about to shoot there. And I was like,
Mm.
that seems like a dream job to me. Like I love like work. I'm not like a super, able person when it comes to construction-y type stuff. My dad shames me about it all the time, but but like I do like working with my hands, and I like being involved in like creative stuff, and I'm like, oh great, like that would be the job for me, to be like the person like painting the bricks on the
Mm.
fake bricks on the studio set. So yeah,
Yeah.
love that kind of stuff.
I did have a friend of mine shot her thesis film at Brooklyn College and built a set for it that I helped build. That was I think the only time I've ever really like been part of a production that like was fully shot on a set that was built specifically for the project. And it was very cool. Like it was cool to build it, and it was cool to see it like dressed with. It was a movie about a hoarder, so there was like it was dressed with just like so much stuff everywhere, and it was all just like real stuff people brought in and just like piled up, and then it was like there for a week or whatever, and then like a day after it was finished, it was like completely gone, which is
Wow.
just bananas.
I do. Okay, I want to mention. So as I was watching it, the first time, I only wrote down like 5 bullet points throughout the whole film, but one of them was the quote, "Faded, fat, greedy women." And I
Mm,
just want to address it's the scene where they're talking about widowers, and obviously, like the people, his victims were widowers. And first of all, it's wonderful acting, but like Charlie's monologue, where he's talking about, he's basically saying, like, you can feel his hatred for widowers specifically. And he starts off by saying, women in the cities are different than, the people in these smaller towns like Santa Rosa, I guess, at the time. But he straight up starts just kind of unleashing, and he basically says, like, these widowers, they take their husband's money after they die, and they just don't know what to do with themselves. They spend it, they're silly, blah blah blah. And I wrote down that he called them horrible, useless, and then faded, fat, greedy women. And then someone in the scene says, they're alive, they're human beings. And he says, are they? So I thought that was an interesting, just like insight into, since mind you, he's a serial killer, into like the dehumanization of his
right.
Mm.
victims. And it kind of made me analyze his interactions with young Charlie even more. And it kind of like highlights that just sinister nature that he has.
Yeah, I think that scene in particular really kind of like shows his like misanthropic nature, but I think it is kind of more what's the other one? What's the female centric one?
Misogynistic.
Yeah, like it I was like, "Oh, he's a misogynist. That's his deal." And yeah, cuz I mean it's one of the, I think kind of the few times where it's like it does feel like a kind of a more of a clear window into what his like thought process is. I think a lot of the rest of the time he has like this veil of charm or decency that then gets pulled back very very quickly and suddenly, and like I think that too of like seeing him go from being like a very like charming seemingly like nice person to like on a dime be like really scary is, I thankfully haven't met that many people like that, but it's something I've heard a lot about like psychopaths and just like you know messed up abusive people is that like that thing, like they go from being very charming to being really scary like in an instant. I think Joseph Cotton does that really really effectively.
Yeah, it speaks to like the compartmentalization, I think, that
Yeah,
allows
yeah.
him to do this. Uh that he sorts people into like uh worthy of death or not worthy of death when it's convenient for him.
Hmm.
Bad man, Uncle Charlie. Not a fan.
Those little moments where, because like most of the film he's charming, but those little moments that let you more into his psyche are really so terrifying. Because we have the one where he's talking about the widowers, but then I think it's later in the film he's talking about, again, going back to like the conversation of what's ordinary, and he's talking to young Charlie, and it's like this long monologue, and he just sounds so threatening in it.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, I guess in the context of like viewing this as someone who is abusive, I don't know. I guess I'm curious, like what conversations at the time looked like, because obviously conversations in 2025 about abuse don't look the same as they did back in 1943.
Mm.
But I'm just curious how audiences kind of reacted to that character, who actually he's based on a real person. I
That's true. I looked that up.
Yeah, you want to tell that story?
I don't remember all the details, but like they did take a lot of. There was a serial killer of like older widows who was also like had a head injury as a child because he like rode his bike into like a streetcar or something like that. And that too is like a weird thing where it's like it is definitely kind of implied in the movie that it's like this childhood head injury is kind of what possibly is like responsible for his like psychopathic tendencies,
Huh.
his murderous urges. which I know there is like precedent for. I mean, like what's the railroad spike guy, Phineas Gage, right? Who like became a different person, and yeah, I think there was other details that this movie kind of took directly from the real murderer. I don't know, Ambriehl, if you remember more about it than I do.
Yeah, just a few things. I know. So I think his real name was Earl Nelson, but his nickname was Gorilla Man for some reason. I didn't feel like diving far enough into like why he's called Gorilla
I
Man.
think just because strangling people like
Oh, okay. Yeah,
that
yeah.
that people thought that that's like gorillas don't strangle as a thing, but I guess in the 19 I think it was the 1920s that
Yeah.
he was murdering. That is
Yeah.
also
So
like the
okay.
most 1920s name for a serial killer. He's the Gorilla
Oh,
Man.
literally. Quite literally. Yeah, the press, I don't know, they hadn't really come up with those bangers yet, I guess.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, he actually murdered like middle-aged landladies, and he would like rent from them temporarily in order to get close to them, and then yeah, like serial rapist, serial murderer, all that. So bad guy. Yeah, just like
yeah.
Charlie.
The Gorilla Man, not a fan.
Nah.
Gorillas though, actual gorillas, big fan.
One time I was in the Bronx Zoo, and I put my hand up to the glass and touched my hand to the gorilla.
Yeah,
um,
cats and gorillas are my favorite things on this planet. Like follow so many gorilla accounts on Instagram. It's like really embarrassing, but so much of my feed is just gorillas, and honestly, I appreciate it. Like I need a break from everything else going on in the world.
for sure.
What are some good, just for my own sake? What are some good gorilla accounts? Because I feel like I
So
want to follow some.
the big one that I follow, I think it's a place in Japan, and the at name is gorilla underscore iro underscore no. So yeah, that's a very big one, and they post constant gorilla clips. And the other ones are just random. And I think my algorithm also just knows what I like, so they show
Right.
me a whole
It's
bunch
like
that are
you
not
watch one gorilla video, suddenly it's like all gorilla videos. Yeah.
literally. And I'm not complaining, honestly. Like I'm not
Yeah.
complaining, so I will take it.
Y'all mentioned the that this was based on a real person, which I kind of didn't make this connection before, but like, Psycho was also
hmm
based on Ed Gein,
I
right?
mean,
Mhm.
vaguely. I actually feel like the Ed Gein thing is like a bit more tenuous in Psycho than in this case. Seems like this shares a lot more details with an actual person, but
hmm I guess it kind of made me realize that like this I didn't even think of this, that like the murder obsessed uh older men in this movie are just like like Hitchcock insert characters.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Wait, did y'all catch Hitchcock's cameo in this film?
No.
Because the first time I watched it, I did not. But I was like, I need to find this. And it's, I think, like 15, 16 minutes into the movie. And you only see the back of his head. So, but like, obviously, you know, it's Hitchcock. It's on the train. And I think it's when like Uncle Charlie is boarding, and he runs into this older couple and they're playing bridge. And the guy they're sitting across from is Hitchcock. So I was like, I need to know where that little cameo is.
Yeah, I forgot to even look for it. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's like anytime I watch a Hitchcock, I'm like, where are you, dude? Like, it's not a
yeah,
Hitchcock if you're not in it.
right. You know he's in there somewhere. Exactly. Yeah.
I guess the only other thing I had to say about this film is kind of going back to like the concept of abuse. I thought it was interesting. And one critique I have of the film is I feel like the end just moves so fast and you're
Mm.
just like,
So abrupt. Yeah.
what? Yeah, it's very abrupt. Because you see them, you know, on the train, he's about to kill her, and then he's the one that dies. And then it very quickly shows us at a church, you know, outside of his funeral, and you hear the pastor or whoever saying, you know, this guy was a hero, blah blah blah. So I think it's interesting how, you know, in modern conversations of abuse, we talk about like the culture of silence, and how this film is showing that exact same thing with, you know, he essentially died with that secret and left Charlotte young Charlie, with all that pain, I guess.
Hmm.
Right, because he's like a hero to the community, right? He's like giving
Mhm.
speeches and like everyone seems to love him. I actually hadn't really thought of that. Yeah, because like it ends in a place where, yeah, right. I guess only. I mean, the rest of her family, I think, would also know. But yeah, that is. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it, and that kind of makes the ending better.
I mean, I think that was all more or less that we had on Shadow of a Doubt,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think so.